Where would the video game industry be without The Legend of Zelda? The mind does boggle, as it's the only thing to ever historically boggle, but still, what would a modern action-adventure game look like without The Legend of Zelda? Even today, games like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are shaping gaming, because you can't see an open world game with a paraglider in it without doing this. For as important and influential as Zelda has been over the last 4 decades, not every single Zelda game could have the same impact as Ocarina of Time, and some have been forgotten to time themselves. Also, some of them were just a bit too weird. Your spidey sense might be tingling, and it should. Run. If you've played Majora's Mask, then beyond the many strange, awesome ways the game shakes up the Zelda formula, you likely also remember one other thing. This game first unleashed Tingle upon the world. It was the video game version of that scene in Cabin in the Woods. This 35-year-old cartographer with an, let's say diplomatically, unflattering design and obsession with fairies was immediately off-putting to Western players with eyes and ears, especially after his return in Wind Waker pushed him back into the spotlight. Even if you aren't aware of his origins, you're probably aware of his reputation as the Western fanbase's most hated character. My most hated character is whoever designed the Yiga hideout in Breath of the Wild crap. That didn't stop Nintendo, however, especially since Tingle is more popular in Japan. In 2006, they and developer Vanpool released one of the strangest spin-offs in the entire Zelda franchise. Freshly picked Tingle's Rosy Rupee Land is a mouthful and also a DS adventure game that's all about money, to a comical degree. Its lead is an unremarkable 30-something man, no, not me, transformed into Tingle and given a mission to reach Rupee Land by Uncle Rupee. The subsequent adventure is all about gathering as many rupees as possible from exploring, selling items, or even haggling with NPCs. Even information costs money in this game, and bargaining with people can be unforgiving, as if you pay too little, you'll get nothing. Pay too much, and you've just wasted money. That's how the economy works. In 2009, Nintendo and Vanpool followed it up with Ripened Tingle's Balloon Trip of Love, where this time another aging dude is sucked into a fantasy book world. Accompanied by characters inspired by the wonderful Wizard of Oz, this new Tingle has to find a way home. And part of that also happens to involve romance this time, as he'll have to win the hearts of 5 maidens in the only way he can, by showering them with presents. Tingle, master of love bombing. While Rupee Land made it to Europe, Balloon Trip never left Japan, and of course neither game made it to the US. Congratulations and or commiserations to all 8 of the Freedom Land Tingle fans that are out there. Guess you guys can only hope that Nintendo one day give Kensuke Tanabe another chance to turn this ferryman's reputation around, be it with an official release of these DS titles or a new game altogether. Just watch this space, I guess. Alright, this'll be a quick one. As important as Game & Watch was, it's hard to find much to say about any of the games. I mean, look at that frame rate. That's 1FP2S there. Before Nintendo really hit it big with the NES, they'd already dipped their toes into gaming with the 1977 Color TV game. The Game & Watch followed 3 years later, having been brought to life after Gunpei Yokoi, who was the man who later created the Game Boy, saw a businessman fiddling with a calculator while riding on a bullet train, and was struck by inspiration. The idea turned out to be a hit, if you didn't know, and while Nintendo eventually moved on to bigger, better things, they didn't forget about Game & Watch. Case in point, in 1989, which is the year of the Game Boy's release, they even put out a Zelda-themed Game & Watch model. As with other Game & Watch games, the gameplay is simple. On the bottom screen, Link must fight off a mini-boss enemy while dodging attacks from other enemies. Taking down the mini-boss opens the way to the next room, and at the end of the labyrinth, Link will face down a dragon on the top screen for a piece of the Triforce. Though ultimately more of a distraction than a full-fledged game, Zelda Game & Watch did push what an LCD game could really do. And that's not BS. This is. Decades before cloud streaming and Game Pass and so on, Nintendo first experimented with broadcast technology for gaming with the Satellaview. Released as an add-on for the Super Famicom, users needed an active subscription to ST Giga Station and could only access the service between 4 PM and 7 PM. Among the titles released for the service were BS The Legend of Zelda and its sequel, Ancient Stone Tablets. BS Zelda was something like a 16-bit reimagining of the original Legend of Zelda. Though the game certainly looked like its source material, there were several major differences. For one, the overworld was chopped in half for a more compact experience. Dungeons were also completely rearranged, and instead of exploring this iteration of Hyrule as Link, you played as a player-created avatar instead. But the most unusual element was the time limit. These games were playable for only one real-life hour per week, and were split into episodes that each altered the world map to open and close different areas. And during your limited session each week, various events like buffs and item discounts would occur for a limited time. A live service Zelda game? Kind of. Several months after BS Zelda's broadcast, a second version was released which further remixed the game's dungeon designs. Ancient Stone Tablets was broadcast over a year later and was a pseudo-sequel, remake to A Link to the Past. While the fundamentals of BS Zelda, like the time limit, were still present, Ancient Stone Tablets added some features of its own, including an item rental system over 16 years before A Link Between Worlds. Owing to the ephemeral nature of broadcast games, both BS Zelda titles have long since been shut down, but thanks to the efforts of the community, the games have been preserved and are playable on... I forget the name. What was it called? Oh, one second, let me just say bye to this emu. Lators. There you go, there's the alibi for the lawsuit. Nintendo may have forgotten about these titles, but it's a shame when they can just probably wave their magic wand and make them come back.
Lamp oil, rope, bombs? You want it? It's yours, my friend.
We've covered the story of the CDI already as a footnote in the part of Nintendo's history where they were a bit cheeky and helped the creation of the PlayStation brand we all know and love today. But what about the games themselves? Well, despite publicly jilting Sony in favour of Philips, Nintendo eventually gave up on the idea of a CD-based add-on entirely after witnessing the Sega CD's failure. This time, Nintendo at least had the courtesy to give Philips the right to use several of their characters and IPs to make their own CDI games, and they never ever regretted it. The Faces of Evil stars Link as he adventures through the island of Korodai to stop Ganon, while the Wand of Gamelon puts Zelda in the spotlight as she investigates the disappearances of her father and Link in the land of Gamelon. But beyond some basic input regarding character designs, Nintendo provided no support for these games, and yes, it shows. Developer Animation Magic were on their own, and with a budget of only $600,000, the results speak for themselves. Both games are 2D action-adventure titles that play like the NES's Zelda 2, though with worse controls, and an art direction that makes it difficult to pass where you can move, so it's not really better in any sense. It's worse in every single conceivable way. They're pretty awful as games. Of course, what everyone actually remembers about these games is the absolutely atrocious cutscene animation that spawned an era of meme videos. At least someone liked these games though, enough to make a spiritual successor with members of Digital Foundry on board for production, writing and level design. By all accounts, RZ the Jewel of Faramore stuck the landing and turned out as a much better game than its inspirations, but it could have just worked and that would have been enough. When you think about it, these two steaming pieces of shit probably why Nintendo has built up such a strong brand and why they're now so protective of the brand. So really, they're more influential and important than anyone really gives them credit for, kind of, if you want to really stretch it, maybe. It's probably why we don't have Mario in Fortnite yet, and why I can't sleep at night. Next up, sorry guys, I've got to talk about him again. Don't fight it, just go gently. Just go gently. Like the video game equivalent of staring into the sun, let's not overexpose you to too much tingle with this next game. We don't want a Bird Box thing going on after all. Released in the gap between Rupee Land and Balloon Trip of Love, Tingle's Balloon Fight DS is a remake of the NES's Balloon Fight. As with the original release, Tingle's Balloon Fight features a few key modes, which are a single-player mode focused around defeating enemies in arcade-esque stages and a co-op mode. This little freak of a release also added a new balloon trip mode which featured 99 stages of obstacle courses for Tingle to navigate, all while collecting rupees. And it's got graphics, and sound. There's not much to say about this game, but we'll at least say this. Tingle's Balloon Fight DS was released exclusively for Club Nintendo members in Japan. As simple as the game may be, getting a full physical release as part of a customer loyalty program is absolutely mind-boggling, even by the standards of that era. It's too bad that Club Nintendo was never that interesting in the US, and that customer loyalty programs these days aren't as worthwhile anyways. I'd be pretty cross about it if I wasn't in the UK and never got anything anyway. Following the massive success and universal acclaim for Twilight Princess, Shigeru Miyamoto wanted a side story follow-up that could be developed and released quickly to help tide fans over until the next mainline entry. But after shooting down ideas from staff of being epic tales instead of the side story he wanted, Miyamoto arrived at the idea of the Wii Zapper. Conceived by a member of the Twilight Princess development team, the peripheral came about after the initially skeptical Miyamoto, who has since relaxed his stance on gun control, held a prototype in his hands. From there, the project would ultimately become Link's crossbow training, a showpiece for the Wii accessory. While Miyamoto initially wanted to exclude boss battles from the game, pushback from staff eventually caused him to compromise, and Star-Lord from Twilight Princess would make it in as the game's final and only boss. Owing to Miyamoto's restrictions, Link's crossbow training is a simple arcade shooter. There are 3 types of levels. You've got target shooting levels, which are on-rail stages where you shoot at clearly marked targets. Then you've got defender levels, which have a stationary Link hold off waves of enemies from all angles. And then finally you got ranger stages, which give Link free movement, and you try not to gently fall asleep throughout all of them. Yeah, if you played this when you were a young kid, you might have a soft spot for it, but it is pretty dull, and Link's crossbow training may be more of a tech demo and hardware showpiece than a full game. The story behind its development is fascinating regardless. I will be pretty Picross if it never gets ported. That's a lie, and I already used that joke. Released as a digital reward exclusively on My Nintendo, the Twilight Princess Picross spin-off, let's try saying that 3 times fast, for the 3DS is just that, a game of Picross with a Twilight Princess coat of paint. Twilight Princess Picross spin-off, Twilight Princess Gosh. After a What's Picross done to me? After a brief tutorial courtesy of Midna, you're set loose on a slate of nonogram puzzles which, for the uninitiated, have players fill in spaces on a grid in accordance with the numbers that label each line. It's simple but brain-stimulating stuff, and Twilight Princess Picross's puzzles all draw from various Zelda items and objects. I feel like I'm saying a System of a Down lyric each time. Twilight Princess Picross, you wanted to. Released in March 2016, this My Nintendo reward was there mainly to promote the Twilight Princess HD remaster, which had made its debut on the Wii that same month. Oh, and remember when Miiverse was still a thing? You could use completed puzzles as stamps for posts there too, if you bothered to engage with the true peak of social media. We know you're ready for the more substantial stuff though, and you don't want to see me in pain anymore, do you? So let's move on to something with a bit more rhythm. Twilight Princess Picross spin-off. Twilight Princess... While the whole CDI thing did scare Nintendo off of collaborations for a while, they do still do some roughly once a decade, but nobody could have predicted this one. Sometimes when a third-party game makes the jump to a new platform, it gets a bit of promotional DLC to tie in with the respective console. Developer Brace Yourself Games intended to do this with Crypt of the Necrodancer, only for negotiations with Nintendo to end up with them getting the honour of using the Zelda IP to make a new, full-fledged installment for the Nintendo Switch. Released in 2019, Cadence of Hyrule is a rhythm game where everything, from moving to attacking, is done to the beat of music. This spin-off also brilliantly mixes in elements from the Zelda franchise, such as the series' iconic items and music. Combat is simple, with Link, Zelda or Cadence attacking enemies when you move towards adjacent enemies. Of course, it's also a roguelike, and we all know what that means. Dungeons are randomly generated, and you lose items and rupees when you die. Any diamonds you get for clearing the screen of all enemies are kept, and you can spend them at a shop to buy equipment for your next run. Though there's definitely an adjustment period for beginners, I remember really struggling with it to begin with, Cadence of Hyrule has a way of drawing you in with its remixes, gorgeous sprite work and quality of life features like a fixed beat mode that eliminates the need to play in time with the music. While Brace Yourself Games is still going strong, having released Rift of the Necro Dancer earlier this year, a sequel or spiritual successor to Cadence of Hyrule would be very welcome, because sometimes a spin-off can hit that mix of nostalgia and innovative magic in ways that a main series entry just can't. Dear Diary, they haven't realised yet that I am going bald, and they never will as long as I wear this hat. The hat keeps me safe. Full stop. Oh, you're probably waiting for some kind of segue here or something, aren't you? Well, I can only try, but I'm not going to force it. Heroes, Season 1. With a Metacritic score of 73, the 3DS's Triforce Hero stands out as one of the few proper Zelda titles that did launch to unanimous acclaim, and well, yeah, it's not brilliant. Several years after the events of A Link Between Worlds, Link, yes, the same Link from that game, despite now looking like Toon Link, shows up in the kingdom of Hytopia, where, bear with us, fashion is incredibly serious business. The local princess, Styler, has been cursed and trapped in a brown jumpsuit by a fashionista witch. Link is, as ever, ready to answer the call to action, but this time he's accompanied by two other people claiming to be the hero of Hytopia's prophecy. Triforce Heroes is a multiplayer co-op title like Four Swords and Four Swords Adventures, just with one less Link. You'll team up with two other players to fight your way through dungeons, all while solving the puzzles that have made the franchise so iconic. There's a few new twists here, as all Links share health and can stack on top of each other as a totem pole for a variety of functions, and there are a wealth of costumes, each of which feature different special abilities. It all sounds like pretty solid stuff, doesn't it? But not everyone has friends, and even then they may not be Zelda nuts, and that's one of the places where the game really falls short. Single player just really feels tacked on here, as instead of AI companions, a solo player has to constantly switch control between the three Links, making for just a clunky, annoying experience. Even multiplayer has its problems, as communication is limited to just emotes. Though Triforce Heroes falls short of the quality people expect from a Zelda game, it's still better than a few games in today's episode. Right, for the last game of today, let's go on an adventure. Do not fight it. Sorry, we have to. We have to do this. Come on. While Animation Magic were busy wrangling with their two assigned titles for the CDI, developer Viridis was taking a different approach. Released exclusively in Europe almost 3 years after the Faces of Evil and the Wand of Gamelon, Zelda's Adventure opted for a live-action approach. The sprites and FMVs were both done in live action, with characters being played by office staff. And unlike the other two Zelda CDI titles, Zelda's Adventure returns to the traditional top-down gameplay the main series became acclaimed for. And that fixed everything, and Nintendo and Philips lived happily ever after. No, unfortunately, due to a combination of control issues, the CDI controller itself, trial and error level design, and a needlessly large world, Zelda's Adventure ended up being a far worse experience than its older siblings. Despite the development team having been explicitly told to observe and recapture the magic of A Link to the Past, a troubled development cycle during which testing lasted longer than the actual development on hardware that was never meant to be a games console meant that the result would never match up to the lofty heights of the game's inspiration. By 1996, whatever market there was for the CDI had all but dried up in the United States, and the American release of Zelda's Adventure simply went down with the sinking ship, meaning that Europe was the only region that ever saw the game. Thanks to this, and the use of live action instead of memorable animation for all the wrong reasons, Zelda's Adventure has been relegated to obscurity as one of the most forgotten Zelda games ever released. But don't forget to stick around for the outro. Outro gang, thanks for joining me here in the outro. I hope you enjoyed that one. Did you have any other weird and kind of forgotten Zelda games that you wanted to see included? I did for a second there want to put in the Oracle of Seasons and Oracle of Asians? Oracle of Ages game. You know what? I'm just gonna leave that. I was gonna retake it, but you know what I meant, right? I was just having a funny day. Thanks again to our members that are visible right here. If you want to become a member, you can do so down below for just 99 pence or freedom cents a month. I've been Jimmy of Culture Vultures. Been good to have you, and thanks for watching. Bye.